It's a big weekend for Texas Tech football. On the recruiting trail as a top 10 player in the class of 2024 will be in the 806 this weekend. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I am RC Maxfield here for the Back to 12 podcast. And in today's video, we'll talk about that five-star wide receiver, Micah Hudson, taking his official visit to the 806. We'll also talk a little bit about Big 12 expansion, as I know the burner's already been at like 9 on the relative scale of 1 to 10, but I kind of wanted to give my thoughts as UConn is maybe in the mix, and as it really looks like the Pac-12 will have no way to get a media rights deal that is even significantly close to what the Big 12 has. But let's start out with Texas Tech football and a five-star wide receiver on campus. Five-star wide receiver Micah Hudson is set to take his official visit to Texas Tech this weekend, starting June 9th through the 11th. He then will take another official visit to the University of Texas. As of right now, those are the only two official visits that the five-star wide receiver has currently on his schedule. And really, if you look at all the recruiting sites that know much more detail about Micah Hudson in terms of what's going on in his recruitment process, it really looks like it's going to come down to Texas Tech and Texas when it comes down to where will he play college football. And you look at this, he's got a couple of Texas Tech ties, right? His dad is the main one, as Desmond Royal is his dad. He played DT at Texas Tech in the late 80s, but you look at what he's done in terms of kind of being in the process for Texas Tech, right? He's shown up for junior days. He's gone to Texas Tech a couple times now. He's done the same for Texas, but it really feels like these two institutions are going to be the ones really down to the final second fighting for him to come to their respective schools. And now, when you look at what he kind of reminds me of and what he stands for as a kid in terms of the interview process and everything, first and foremost, I'll say this. He knows how to do a great interview in terms of he is already a professional in terms of his mindset, right? But when I watch the tape of him, he kind of reminds me of two Ohio State wide receivers. One's going to be a rookie, one going into his sophomore season. He really reminds me of Chris Olave, and of course, I mean sophomore season in the NFL. Chris Olave and Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's who he reminds me of as a wide receiver. Is he the fastest guy on the field? No, I mean, that's not to take away from his quickness. He is very, very fast indeed. But he's more of that guy where he's quick twitch, he makes one cut, and he's going to beat you after that, right? And he's absolutely dynamic in the open field. He's all about his business. And I really think for Texas Tech, and this is obviously a Captain Obvious type deal, he would cause a massive trickle-down effect. This would be the highest ranked recruit ever to come to Texas Tech. Obviously, 24/7 composite, number 7 player in the class of 2024. He would be the pinnacle of the recruiting process so far for Texas Tech under Joey McGuire, with James Blanchard leading the way in that department, right? He would be that guy. There's obviously a lot to work to do in terms of Texas Tech getting to sign that, national letter of intent and making him be a Red Raider in his college career, right? But this is a huge step for Texas Tech and a huge weekend for the Red Raiders in terms of trying to get Micah Hudson to be a Red Raider. And for me, in my opinion, this is arguably one of the biggest recruiting weekends that Texas Tech has had in the past. I don't mean to, basically make this sound a little bit bigger than it is, but maybe ever, right? Like, this is one of those weekends where this is one of the biggest recruiting weekends ever for Texas Tech, because they have a legitimate shot at landing a top 7 player in the class of 2024. And if we know anything about Texas Tech and what this coaching staff stands for, it's relationships. You see it all the time on social media, what the relationships, right? That's what this business is about, and Texas Tech has done a phenomenal job so far at building those genuine relationships, and that's why they're in this position. Sure, his dad going to Texas Tech is part of it, but when it comes down to it, this staff builds relationships with these guys in a genuine way that is so authentic that Texas Tech will be in a lot of these recruiting battles till the very end because of those relationships. Again, you look at this, I want to hear from you guys. Does Texas Tech eventually land five-star wide receiver Micah Hudson? It's going to be the pinned comment down below, just a Y for yes or N for no. Again, I think this is one of the biggest weekends in recruiting Texas Tech has had. And, they go around, they do a bunch of things in Lubbock. But this is a big one for Texas Tech. There's no doubt about it. And I'm going to be very interested, and as should you, in terms of the recruiting process for this star wide receiver and an instant impact guy right away if he did end up in the scarlet and black. All right, let's talk about Big 12 expansion. I've been kind of quiet on this, mostly because I've just been reading the news like you guys, but I really want to give my thoughts on this. Is kind of, you hear about these, Colorado school in terms of them meeting with their board of regents or holding a meeting or whatever it may be. The Arizona president coming out and making comments about the Pac-12. This is kind of my overarching thought about it. I see no way that the Pac-12 gets anywhere near the amount of money that the Big 12 gets in terms of media rights and what they can disperse to their schools, right? I think Brett Yarmark has done a phenomenal job in terms of rebranding the Big 12, something that Bob Busby just didn't do when he was the commissioner. He had some positives as a commissioner, but overall, I think Brett Yarmark is a breath of fresh air for the Big 12. And the expansion talks, in terms of my opinion, are do as much as you can, as fast as you can, in terms of realistically, right? Like, just don't go out there adding schools for no, real reason at all, right? Go out there and add institutions that will add to the value of your conference. And I'm very confident that the commissioner of the Big 12 is going to do that, right? You talk about what's came out recently in the news, and at the time of this recording, the news for the Big 12 was they're going to play a game down in Mexico City, both football and men's basketball. At least that's the hope right now, starting in 2024. John Rothstein said it's going to be Kansas and then Houston down there playing, right? Like, they want to go global in terms of North America, in terms of into Canada and Mexico. They're going to start with Mexico, right? They want to make the Big 12 brand that much bigger. And I think that is talked about in terms of the expansion, in terms of going coast to coast and having a potential team in every time zone of the country. That's a big deal, right? Because then you can start the early games, you're in the middle slot, and then you're also in the late slot as well. That's potentially huge, right? You're getting as many possible eyeballs as you possibly can on these schools in the Big 12 while adding big-time institutions, whether that's Colorado, the Arizona schools, UConn, whether Utah's involved. Maybe somehow you get Washington and Oregon somewhere down the line if the Pac-12 does dissolve, if they don't go to the Big 10, right? Like, you have potential options to add schools, right? And I think the way that he's gone about it in terms of branding it coast to coast is something that I think is absolutely pivotal for the Big 12. And I'll be honest with you, I think we're going to hear about, like, confirmed expansion by the time we have kickoff for the Big 12 football season. I truly believe that's going to happen. Whether that's Colorado and the Arizona schools or whoever it may be, I think that's going to happen because at this rate, I just don't see the Pac-12 really getting anywhere significantly close to the media rights that the Big 12 has. And if that's the case, if you're Colorado and Arizona schools, what's keeping you there, right? Like Utah, what's keeping you away, right? You got a built-in rival right there with BYU in the conference. Like, what's keeping you there? I just think it's going to dissolve. I think the Pac-12 will dissolve, and I think the Big 12 is the conference that will capitalize the most off of this and really cement themselves as that third brand in terms of conferences in America behind the SEC in Big 10. But I want to hear from you guys in terms of the expansion talk. Let me know. You see the comment below. How excited would you be if the Big 12 did expand? Scale of 1 to 10. You know the rules on this. Let me know in the comments below. And then also, one more time, for the pinned comment below, big time recruiting weekend for Texas Tech, right? Big time. With the number 7 overall player in the class of 2024, according to 24/7 composite rankings. Does Texas Tech eventually land 5-star wide receiver Micah Hudson? Y for yes, N for no. Let me know down in the comments below. I am RC Maxfield reminding you, if you want the latest Texas Tech football news and rumors all year long, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button to stay in the know right here on the Back to 12 podcast channel.